Yeah. Okay, this is education in India from Indiana University, and she's already told us this. Since then, she has researched, recorded, and photographed rock art sites throughout North America and in other countries since 1986. So you've been at it quite a while, Margaret. She has concentrated her efforts on the documentation and study of rock imagery in southern New Mexico and West Texas, and uses her graphic skills to illustrate her own as well as other researchers' publications and presentations. Her published articles on rock imagery appear in the journals of the American Rock Art Research Association, San Diego Rock Art Association, the ASMN volumes, and presentations on rock imagery, and proceedings for the Jornada Mogollon and Mogollon Symposium. She has presented many Zoom presentations, as this will be another you can put on your list, Margaret, and has published in online journals, including the JTAH, that is the Journal of Texas Archaeology and History, and for Old Pueblo Archaeology in Tucson, Arizona. In 2021, she received a grant from the New Mexico Site Steward Program for a free educational Three Rivers coloring book. Margaret received ARA's Castleton Award in 2017, the Archaeological Society of New Mexico's Bryce Award for Archaeological Achievement in 2018, and Associate of the Year 2021 for the Jornada Research Institute. She served on the RAR board from 21 to 23 and won their Wellman Award for Lifetime Achievement in 2023. That is quite a biography, Margaret, and we're pleased to have you this evening.
Thank you so much, Darwin.
You bet.
So welcome, Margaret.
Thank you. Let me see if, there we go. All right, works. So, I'm trying, I got to move the talking heads. Oops, back. All right. This is an area that I am really interested in. I've studied it for a long time, and I hope you enjoy my presentation. I want to start out with a land acknowledgement. The area of the Jornada Mogollon is a very large area, and many of the ancestral Puebloan groups had their ancestors live in this area or nearby. Currently, there's also their descendants, as well as Apache and some of the other less well-known tribes that came from different areas into this area. So for those of you who don't really know where I'm talking about, this is a map from a great little Southwest Archaeology Southwest volume that's just a general discussion of rock art and where the styles are. It's very general, but it has some great maps on it. And this one is one that was put together. There's lots of theories out here, but this one is the best from the data that I'm looking at. What I'm going to be doing is talking about, I'm going to describe things and do distribution and comparison. I'm not going to do interpretation. My main idea of my research is to provide data for researchers and to test earlier theories that have been put forth about the data and see how the work that I've done for quite a number of years stands up to some of these discussions. So first of all, one of the things that's really important, I think, is that there's new dating that has been done. Some of you may have not seen it, others that you have. And that is Miles Miller, who's a Jornada Mogollon archaeologist, has done scientific dating on some tablita fragments and figures, and gotten new radiocarbon dating that extends the Jornada earlier to 500 AD. And this collaborates some data that was brought forth in 1999, but wasn't accepted by archaeologists because of the old wood problem. But these items were made out of soltol or yucca stalks, so they don't have the old word. So if there's one takeaway that you have, is that these dates are earlier. So if you're a person that studies the whole of the Southwest, you'll see this is earlier dates. I started out being interested in the distribution of these goggle-eyed figures, and these are two of the items that Miles dated. So you can see there's a wide range. The people were around for a long time, and they all show up in Mimbres pottery as early as 600 AD. And they also show up in Mexico. I've been lucky on Facebook to be able to find some collaborators to find data that I wouldn't be able to find. So this is kind of one of the ideas that I started with, and I think it was like 1993 when I started with a friend of mine who had been looking for these, and I continue to find them all the time. And this is where they are found. So you can see that distribution very much fits the map that I showed earlier. So there are about 25 examples on Mimbres pottery, but in the rock art, I've found over 600. So in 1925, the Cosgroves, who did excavation for the Peabody, came to Three Rivers, which is probably one of the most famous Jornada sites. Probably many of you have been there. And this is what they said. They said, these designs are so obviously like the Mimbres pottery that it's a way that we can trace migration of these early pottery and the trading between the different groups. This was published in 1965 by the El Paso Archaeological Society. They said that on one boulder, they found a petroglyph depicting an inchworm that was very much like one that they found when they were excavating. I'm not sure which pot they found, but there's two examples of petroglyphs, and then two examples of Mimbres pottery. I'm not going to show you any actual pottery photos. I redraw all of these images as a respect to not show a funeral object in the state. I will say that I put all of this stuff together, but I couldn't have done it without boots on the ground, and a lot of help from a lot of other people, because I have lots of people that I collaborate with. This is at Three Rivers. It's really important. You can't do it all yourself, and it's great to have people that are willing to help you. I know many of you have probably done some recording and understand that. One of the things that happens is that a lot of this work ends up in gray literature. From 1986 to 1992, there were crews from the New Mexico Rock Art Recording School that recorded Three Rivers, which has 22,000 images within about a mile on a ridge. And they spent 6 years recording this rock art. And without the help of these records, I would not be able to do as good a job. So I want to explain briefly what I was talking about when I said I'm using descriptions. I have to use words because I'm talking to you, but I don't want it to be assumed that I am trying to interpret it. I'm just trying to describe it. For instance, this is an image of what appears to be a centipede in a shelter cave in Texas. And here's a centipede in real life. They look alike, but that doesn't mean that that image from the shelter is just a natural depiction of the centipede. It probably has other meanings, but so I'll just compare them, but not interpret them. And I hope that doesn't disappoint anybody, but I don't think I have enough information to do that. So let's talk briefly about Lexon's seductive idea of Chaco Meridian. So Lexon suggests that there's a connection, a north-south connection between Chaco, Mimbres, and Casas Grande. It's a really kind of sexy idea that a lot of people are interested in. But when you start to look at the data, I really don't think it holds up. And I hope that when you're done, when I'm done, that you'll see that there's more an east-west connection instead of a north-south connection. There actually is almost no Mimbres pottery found in Chaco and no Chaco pottery found in the Mimbres. And so that makes me wonder very much about that connection. One of my first, and that it was interesting because when that article came out where Lexon used this illustration, I was very intrigued. It was 1997 and I didn't know much about this area. And so I thought, wow, that's a really cool idea. And I wrote my friends and said, what do you think? I still have that letter. But then over the years, when I moved to Las Cruces, one of my first projects was to record the Cottonwood Springs site here north of town. It's on federal land that's restricted, so I got an invitation and I looked up what had been done before as far as the rock art site, and it really hadn't. Lexon reported it, and he did all the dirt archaeology, and then he included these few photographs and said, well, there's a bunch of petroglyphs and they must have been important. But that's pretty much all he said. And if you've read his books, you'll have noticed that he very frequently leaves out or only briefly mentions anything about petroglyphs. And I think this is one of the major problems that archaeology has, is they leave out this whole set of important artifacts and look at everything else. And so that it's kind of one of my missions. Anyhow, there was Alex Kurota did a study of sites in White Sands Missile Range, and he found 30 sites that had Mimbres pottery in it. Now, this White Sands Missile Range is between Three Rivers and the San Andreas Mountains. So it's far from the Mimbres, but this is where I start to see that there are some very good hints about how they moved across the landscape between East and West. So this is right here up in the far right-hand corner is where Cottonwood is. And if you look out across the landscape, so you think about if you're traveling across the landscape, you would look out and you would want to see some landmarks that would help you to get across this area. And these three areas are Rincon, San Diego Mountain, and the Donna Ana Mountains. They're all very visible from Cottonwood. They're obvious places, and all of them have rock art. And as you go across the landscape, you can start to see places. You see the clusters of rock art in the lower left are rock art images that are along a waterway that goes and leads to the Mimbres Valley. And so this is what started getting me thinking about this idea. So the combination is when you start to, for me, when you see side-by-side comparisons of the petroglyphs and pictographs with the Mimbres ceramics, it's really remarkable how similar they are. And the more you look, the more you find. These are just a few examples of the similarities. And so one of the things that I was able to do, besides looking, I'm really lucky to live a couple hours from Three Rivers, a couple hours from the Western New Mexico University Museum, which has one of the finest Mimbres collections. And I'm also, during the pandemic, I got invited to join a Mimbres discussion group where they were talking about all kinds of things. I was the kind of the weird person out. I was the only non-archaeologist, but my specialty is iconography. So I was able to get access to the whole Mimbres database. So there are over 10,000 images in that database that if you have a research design, you get to look at. So that gave me a whole different perspective because I got to see many more of the images. The one thing about this is that, like I said, I do drawings, and I'm only showing you examples that have a provenience, because there are many fakes out there and many looted Mimbres designs, pottery. So I'm trying not to show you those because we're not sure of the information there. One of the interesting things is mostly when you see pictures, they're the really cool representative things. And in reality, only about 25% of those figures that are in the Mimbres are representative. The rest of them are geometrics. So one of the differences between rock art and pottery is that we know where the rock art is. You know, in most cases, there are cases where it's been looted, but we know where it is because that's, you know, it has a GIS location. The bad thing is there's really not many databases out there to go and be able to look for them. But we also have some other information that we record, and that's orientation and whether the picture painted and the different styles. So I've worked since my first project was 2009, and I continue to record projects. This is one of those along that waterway that I showed you earlier. So my idea is to compare and contrast the images between the two medias, either thematically or visually, and look at some of the things that the artistic conventions and the things that are missing either in the Mimbres or the vice versa. Now, in 2021, Lexon did a presentation where he talked about these images, and I have to admit I was a little surprised because he said that Mimbres pots were hot and dangerous, and as with that to me was a real surprise, and I was actually kind of irritated me. And he used these two examples as so he essentially cherry-picked a couple of. Now, you know, I can understand the one on the right might look dangerous to some people if you but the one he showed if you look, there's an area that was not, they didn't find. And when it was restored, they included a knife in that, which made it look more dangerous. The one on the right is actually, many people think it's a whimsical kind of a sex joke. But one of the things that I did was when I recorded cottonwood, we did a very thorough study. And what Lexon said there were a few images. It turned out to be that there were over 300 panels. And we did a very careful study of these areas so that we could do a better analysis of those things. And as I've recorded, we found lots of similarities. And this is, there again, it's the boots on the ground and being able to look at both the rock art in context and the pottery design. So you can see several examples here that show the similarities between these two. That if you looked at the rock art in Chaco Canyon, it doesn't look anything like Mimbres pottery. But this Jornada pottery, this Jornada rock art has many, many similarities. So the Mimbres database, the Mimbres has been dated. Their early Mimbres pit house designs is 650. There were a few figurative bowls at that time, but most of the ones that have comparisons are in the Mimbres classics. And I'm not the only one, of course, that says that the Jornada, that the Mimbres were, okay, back up. Many people say the Mimbres influence the Jornada. I think it's the other way around. I think the Jornada influenced the Mimbres, or they were a group that shared their iconography together. And I think that those new dates help to show that. This is another really interesting design. I'm showing you cottonwood, which is that area where that you can see the different images. And then this is a drawing of a woven textile from Mule Creek, which is very much like the design at the rock art site. We also have, and I know you all have plenty of horned serpents in your area, but we actually don't, which is an interesting thing. And there are not many on Mimbres pottery either. They've been interpreted as horned serpents, but maybe 3. And when I say horned serpents, I don't mean Quetzalcoatl. It's a snake that has a horn, but none of them have feathers. And you might, some people still like to call them that, but I try not to. I think using that kind of word is interpretive. So, and I went out and looked in my collections to find the horned serpents, and there really was only 50, which is remarkable since I understand on Mesa Prieta in northern New Mexico, there's over 1,000 there. Anyhow, I do have some extra help with feathered serpents at my house. There's also in the Mimbres style too, we get these interlocking scrolls, and I was excited I found these interlocking scrolls at almost every Jornada site. They're not something that people have remarked on. You don't find them in the books. You might find a picture of them, but people don't talk about them very much, but they are. And so I think that's an important thing to note. And it's part of the idea of tracing the ideas across the landscape. We have fish forms, which are fairly rare as far as what I've seen in other areas. I'm not an expert on any other area. I've been around, I've talked to people. I talked to Polly Shasmy about fish, and she said she could only remember 6 or 7 in the northern part of New Mexico. But there again, we don't have databases, and I do not have a complete database, but I have many pictures. And so I try to keep track of these and do these distributions. So again, you see this same area going from west to east, from the Mimbres Valley to the Jornada, as far up as in Sierra Blanca, north of Capitan, which is one of the areas of the Jornada that's less well known because a lot of it's on private property. The differences in the media make some of the things that aren't exactly the same. It's because it's easier to paint on that really nice station. You know, you can hold that pot in your lap, and these artists were incredible. I've done these drawings for a long time, and let me tell you, I can't imagine how they did them. They were just really amazing. But the surface of the rock is different. And the compositional space, the Mimbres used these round surfaces, and so they had a different perspective than when you have a rock, you have an up and a down. One of the other things that I found comparisons, that in the rock art of the Jornada, I found many bighorn sheep that appear to bighorn sheep images associated with anthropomorphs that appear to be there. It's not something that's typical. You don't see. You wouldn't literally see a person with a whole bighorn sheep on their head. So there's a good chance that could be a ceremony. There aren't any examples of that in Mimbres, but there are plenty of bighorn sheep. These are remarkable. These are anthropomorphs, and they're hard to see, but when you see them, they're clearly very similar to the ones on Mimbres pottery, right down to the square jaws that you see. This is a particularly interesting one. Now, Harry Schaefer, who is a Mimbres archaeologist who worked on Nan Ranch and continues to be interested in the area, his idea was, rather than these pots being dangerous, that they had other uses, and that they were used to make to do feasting and to form bonds between the people in the Mimbres Valley. Now, I'm obviously not the first person that has compared these images across the landscape. There are several people that have done this, including Polly Shasmy. But because I'm in the area and I have all of these friends that have helped me over the years, and because I have access to the Mimbres database, I have more data. When Polly did her writing about this area, she used 30 sites. I have 500 sites. You have more data. I think in most cases, you are able to come to a better conclusion, or else you figure out ways to look at things differently. Polly thought that the ceramics were about the underworld because they were associated with burials. But Harry Schaefer has discussed that many of these items were heavily used. They show use wear, and so he thinks that they were buried with the people, but it wasn't about the underworld. It's about the associations between the people that lived together in the Mimbres Valley and formed actually a corporation of sorts between the people to be able to succeed and live in that area. One of the writers said that there were some conventions that were used. And I'm using the word art here because I think it's sometimes appropriate when we're talking about how the image looks. So these are some fairly obvious examples of Mimbres potteries that look very much like rock art. The one in the top is a painted image from Oiko tanks. Now, research isn't always easy, and it involves a lot more than boots on the ground. This is the area at the Bureau of Land Management where all the Three Rivers photographs are, and this is part of them. And one of the things that I am doing is I am taking all of those. They photographed every boulder with a mark on it, and I'm scanning those. I'm about 3/4 of the way through, but I find new things all the time, which is really cool. And I find new examples that could compare with the Mimbres iconography. My idea is that because it's such a huge site, that was very important and may possibly have been a place that was a pilgrimage. But another thing that Lexon said is that he thinks that the Mimbres stored their dangerous iconographies in the boonies at Three Rivers. And this is a quote. But he doesn't say why he labels it dangerous, and he ignores the fact that the Jornada imagery, some of it came before the classic Mimbres, and much of it is also geometric. So I'm not sure how you can interpret something like this or the geometrics on Mimbres pottery as dangerous. One of the difference is there are some differences, but those will have to wait till another time. There aren't many narrative scenes in Jornada Mogollon imagery like there are in Mimbres pottery, as we well know. One thing is there's still a lot to do. This is a map that I show in most of my presentation that includes all of that kind of beigey yellow is BLM land. So I'm able to visit sites on that area, but there's other areas that I can't look at. It's private property in Texas. I can't go to Mexico. There's tribal land. So there's still a lot out there, and we don't have we don't have as much information on the Mimbres as we would like because of the heavy looting. Anyhow, so when I talk about petroglyph pathways, I'm really talking about cognitive maps. So that these images across the landscape were used to mark the landscape as they traveled along. And it was like a reminder. They knew where they were going, but these were markers. So it's really fun to look at these and compare them with the Mimbres pottery. I also was able to recently, I knew that there was an older gentleman who did a lot of work in this area earlier on when you were able to go on much more of the private property. And I lucked out and I found his legacy slide collection and was able to add quite a few images that were on private property. And so that then gave me the idea where I had originally, when I gave this presentation in the shorter version for the Society of American Archaeology in Chicago, where I just talked about that traveling across the lower part of the Jornada. But when I saw those images that in his collection, I found out they were in some of the drainages further north. And so I'm starting to look for other possible pathways. they would have easily been able to, if they were going from east to west or west to east, and they could have gone one direction in one season and another and the other coming back. They would go up the drainages into the Black Range and easily down into the Mimbres. So I think it's important to relook at some of those theories and look for new comparisons. I did a project with Human Systems Research where they did in Alamosa Creek, which is much further north, and found some Mimbres designs in the pictographs there that compared with and this was one of them. When I first saw it, I was like, well, that looks familiar, but I've never seen it on any Mimbres pottery. I had seen it in rock art in a couple of areas. And then I found this ceramic example was probably made by a child at the Western New Mexico Museum. And then one of my friends said, well, that's Cosgrove's grotesque beast. And so I was like, what? And I found this in a book. So you see that same toothy grin. So this is another example of iconography that's shared across the area. I also sometimes discover it in weird places. I was at the Geronimo Springs Museum and I was like, whoa, those are petroglyph boulders. And I did some research. The people there didn't know where it came from, but I was able to find out that it came from one of those drainages that's further north. So this kind of, I love being a data detective and discovering these kind of things. And I will say that one of the fun things that I did most recently was that while I was scanning that collection of Three Rivers rock art, I found this image and I had never seen it before. Now I will tell you, I live 200 miles away. It's my happy place. I've been there 76 times. And I counted them because when I take pictures, I put them in a folder and I had that many folders. So anyhow, but I didn't know where it was, but with the aid of this, scanning, I was able to find this image, which is very much like the first one that I showed you. Some of the reasons that they might have traveled across the landscape is migration. Which could have happened for various reasons but it doesn't necessarily, they could have just been, it could have been a social reason for ceremony or for trade. So those are just some ideas that I have. So what's next? I keep looking for examples and looking for other archaeologic evidence. One of the things that Lexon says was that the burials done in under the ground in the home of the people was only done in Chaco in the Mimbres area. But that's not true. They found them in the floors of the rooms in the Three Rivers habitation sites. So there's a lot more work to do, but so I keep at it because it's just fun. And I love to draw these. That's part of anyhow. So I hope you remember that we have the updated dates. So start looking at the things that you've read and try to see where the Jornada will fit into the time frames of some of the theories. The map on the right was one that was done, but after the work by Miles Miller, this is a map created by Al Dart of Old Pueblo, and he's actually looking at the data that has been collected and the dates that Miles has put out and he's redrawn his map, which to me is important. And it's one of my goals is to let's look at these ideas, because we know as we have more data that we can find out new things. I think that the images are part of an older pattern that went across a wide area, and I find the cool footprints that they found in White Sands may definitely be an indication that people were here very early, and I have no doubt that they were going to find some more of those. But most of all, I hope that you'll respect and care for these places and enjoy them. So I have a lot of acknowledgement. There's not enough room for all of the people that have helped me. Anyhow. So do y'all have any questions?
Okay, folks, I think if you have them, we can just, Tamara, can we just have them ask, raise hands, something of that sort? Or do we need to go through the chat?
I didn't see anything in the chat, so if they just raise their hands and you can call on them.
Okay,
I
all
don't
right.
see anything yet, so.
You know, the thing that you said, well, there were several things that to me really broaden awareness of their presence, the Mimbres in time and over the land. But I kept coming back to the question of, well, what do you think did happen to, I know that's probably inappropriate, but
That's okay.
what did happen to those Mimbres? Because I liked them so well.
Well, I think that, there's definitely evidence of an environmental challenge that they had. I think they went in many directions, but I do think they were already in the East, but more of them went there and made that their permanent homes. But they also, they could have gone in all directions. But the thing that is somewhat bizarre is that they didn't take their pottery with them. I mean, they didn't make that same kind of pottery when they left. You just don't see that. I mean, there were definitely Mimbres people that lived in Mexico earlier on, and they find those in older excavations. But once that classic period ended, they didn't make pottery anymore. So the idea that Harry Schaefer has is that they were no longer a corporation that needed to hold themselves together. The Mimbres didn't have elites until very much later. They didn't have conflict. You don't find conflict in Jornada rock art or in Mimbres pottery, only a very few, compared with some images from further north, where there's conflict. The Jornada were around for a very long time, which also makes me think that there wasn't conflict there. Whatever they were doing, to make that corporation, and that's a weird word, but that association across the landscape, it held them together. It helped them not get into conflict. There's no evidence of people with I mean, there was domestic, kind of your ordinary domestic violence injuries in some of them, but they're not spears or arrow points in any of the figures, the human remains. So,
well, I thought when you talked about that term dangerous,
yeah,
in some of the iconography, I thought about the different bowls and the iconography on those bowls and how whimsical they were.
yes.
And your evidence apparently indicates that these were bowls that they used in daily life. And it makes me wonder how they chose them for their dead. You know, how did they, were they the favorite bowls of the deceased, or they're just not serious and dire or words like that. They are more playful. And so I just wonder about their whole thinking relative to placing them over the, you know, remains of the deceased.
So you know, to me, they're beautiful. We also, you know, people that we love, you might associate them with things and want them to have those as part of their resting. I don't have any of the answers, but I found the remark that they were dangerous to be quite irritating, because they really are beautiful. So
Margaret, I'm going to ask him. If I see him, I won't quote you.
you can tell him.
Right. But I will say, what did you mean by that? That's a curious statement. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, and, you know, I think sometimes different people understand things differently. As an artist, I just see the beauty in these bowls. I know they meant more than that, I think. So, but I certainly don't. I mean, in any data set, you're going to find a few things that might be considered dangerous. I just don't find that, as when you look at the big picture, that you find that. So
yeah.
I think JT, you had your hand up. You have to unmute.
Margaret, Faith and I would like to express our thanks for this presentation, and then your extraordinary artistry in the depictions and interpretations that you make. That's a lot of your work as well, and it's extraordinary artistry. I wondered if you would expound for a second on the one slide that you had about cognitive maps, like mind map, in navigating across the landscapes, places that you've been, especially where people bottlenecked a little, like in Las Palomas, the only way across, or the only way through the Caballo Mountains, and whether you could talk a little bit about places you've been where, you know, you feel their movements.
So initially, the one that most intrigued me was there at Cottonwood Canyon, which there's definitely a canyon that goes from White Sands. I mean, you can see it on the map. Cottonwood has a big spring. It had a very large pueblo, and then out, and it lasted from Pit House to Lake El Paso phase. And that was the kind of thing that gave me the little light in my mind to see that. And my initial idea was that they came through there. I know. That was so obvious to me that if they were traveling, if they were coming from Three Rivers, you know, that they would come down and go across there, because that looked like the easiest way. But that was early on, when I didn't have so much data. Now I have more data. There's a group that's working on White Sands Missile Range that have been able to record more sites on the White Sands Missile Range, which I don't get to do. But because I've helped them in various ways, they've shared that information. And now there's some other areas where they could have crossed. And my initial idea was, because if you looked at that map from Cottonwood, you could see these three areas where you could go across the basin, and then you would run into the Rio Grande River, and you would go around the small mountain range, and then you would be able to go up Broad Canyon. And because I had been in Broad Canyon, and all along Broad Canyon were these goggle-eyed figures. Every place along there, every one of them. And so that to me it's one of the very dominant images that I had seen. But it was also because that's what I was looking for. And that's one of the things I think that we sometimes do is we are looking for something, so we find it. So I've tried not to do that. That's why I've gone on and looked at other images. But then when I found this collection of images from the private collection where I saw Los Palomas in Quicho Negro, I think it's called, I realized that they could have also gone up the Rio Grande and then crossed in those areas. And there are Mimbres, Eastern Mimbres Pueblo on the west side of the river. So that would make it a good place to cross. So, and then it's really not that hard to continue and then see that you'd be in the northern Mimbres Valley and you would come down the valley. And then I started to also make connections in some of the other lower areas. So still a lot of work to do. So.
Yes.
Kim?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good, thank you. This is a fascinating presentation.
Thank you.
And I want to ask a question, and it might be a relatively ignorant question, so I'm sorry in advance. To my understanding, classic Mimbres and Chaco are roughly contemporaneous. And it seems like neither wants any part of what the other is selling, if you will. Any ideas as to why?
Well, and that's not an ignorant question. It's a very interesting question. I think they were very different groups. They shared some, with there's some shared qualities, but as I said, in Chaco had a very it seems to me, and I'm not a Chaco expert. In fact, I kind of sometimes get a little Chaco is so cool. Everybody talks about Chaco and they don't talk about the Jornada, so I'm a little jealous. But they had elite. They had a very when you look at the artifacts, when you look at the things that they built, they had to have some kind of hierarchy to get those things done, rather than necessarily a cooperative group, which is what shows up in the Jornada and in the Mimbres. They cooperated on small projects. They weren't building, although there are some large Jornada pueblos, they were different. And you didn't have those really fantastic grave goods. They do both, the Mimbres, of course, and the Chaco share the macaws, but I think that's a whole different area that's really hard, to understand, and may have just the one thing that I realized, is I started thinking there was, oh, look at all these similarities, and as I've continued, I've discovered that there are a lot of differences across that landscape too, and that each site has its own signature. There's a couple of big sites, Three Rivers has bunches of birds, and there's another very large site that has almost no birds and the same amount of images. So why is that? It's a fun thing to study. I love my job, as I like to say.
Well,
Thanks,
thank
Kim.
you
I think-
very much. That's
Sure.
that's very interesting. Thank you.
Someone else had a question?
Yeah, I'll jump in if I don't know how to show my hand though. So I have to.
Okay, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Margaret. And as I said earlier, I appreciate what you have to say, and it's well taken. And I'm so glad that you're able to do this for us. I guess being an ex-art educator myself, I've always been taken by their ability, their design abilities.
Yeah.
That's always stuck in my mind as one of the best characteristics of the pottery and their art styles. And I'm also want to pay token again to you and your skillful mapping and illustration use there. You've done a great job of illustrating your talk here. I have a question though that's a little bit off base.
Okay.
I recently heard that at Three Rivers, which is one of my favorite sites too, they're having some real issues with staffing and volunteers, and things kind of are not going well. And I'm concerned about that. Can you fill us in on what's really happening there?
I share your concern. I think that often what happens is we hear the bad things. I know that the Bureau of Land Management, I mean, if you look at the area, it's like 5.6 million acres that they cover.
Yeah, I
You
saw
know,
you did, Mark.
yeah.
And you're
And they
yellow.
have to do,
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
they have to do everything. So a lot of people complain, but they did have trouble getting the person that takes care of the camp host, they do not get paid.
Yeah.
They get a free place to stay, electricity and stuff, but they don't get paid. As you all know, it's been really hot. And spending all day at a really hot place, even, I mean, I went twice this summer. It's just been really hot. So but they've also done a lot of work. They put in an ADA, so that people in wheelchairs can at least get up to part of the site to see petroglyphs. They have redone, the area to the habitation sites. They had to do remediation. There is unexcavated areas that had been driven over, so they had to do that. And now they're working. They don't also, I mean, it's the government here, and they don't have money to do a lot of the things that you and I would like them to do. So they have a nonprofit that they're working with to create some new signs. I think it'd be a great place to start a site steward program, but there needs to be somebody, the people that I deal with at the BLM, I volunteer for them. They have so much to do. Because it's such a wide area, it's really hard. So I try to help when I can. And that's why I created the coloring book that they hand out at the visitor center, so that, because it's mostly about site etiquette, anyhow.
Thank
That's
you. Go ahead, Ann.
No, I was just thinking about the coloring book, and I was thinking that is such a good idea, because the children who use that are learning through their hands and eyes, and not just talk and all that. And they can really feel the designs, if that's what's in it. I've not seen the coloring book. I would love to see that. Is it a BLM available?
So that's kind of problematic. So I did it during the pandemic. I included my grandchildren in the drawings, because I could say, Spencer is looking at this. What did Spencer see? And I had a friend who put all the words together and stuff. But the BLM didn't have any money at that point. So I was able to, so all the work was done, but we had to get it printed. So I got money from the New Mexico Site Steward Program. I had a wonderful woman from Utah who gave us some money. And then finally the BLM, because we got this award, they came up with some money. So we had 3,500 copies made and they were all given away in a year and a half. Now they don't. Evidently, we didn't go through the proper channels. And so they want to start from scratch and pay somebody to design it, and then they will get it printed. Anyhow, but it is available online, and probably what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to apply for another grant and just get it printed myself. And then they will still give it away if I find money for it. So anyhow.
Yeah, what keywords would allow me to see that online?
I'll send you a link, but
Okay,
it's on my academia page. I'll send a link.
okay, and we can put it in our newsletter.
That
Because
would
I
be
think
great.
that's fascinating. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah,
Are
it was
there
fun
oth-
too.
Oh, I bet it was. I can see why. Yeah. Any
Kim,
other
did you have another question?
Yes, just a quick one. I heard you mention Waco tanks.
Uh-huh.
Is there evidence down in the Waco tanks area?
Absolutely. There's Mimbres pottery there, but there's lots of, and one of the things I often do is it's easier to illustrate things with a petroglyph than a pictograph. But we have, those faces, and Waco tanks is another, of my favorite places. I actually helped record there. So there's a lot of evidence there too. I did show one example, but there are other ones there too. Yeah.
All right, that'll be fun research for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Margaret, I don't have the same screen as you. You're able to see everyone. Do you see any other hands?
I don't, but I see a chat here.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's just a method from a message from Lori White, and with the thank you. Thank you, Lori. I think she's already gone. So
Well, I would certainly like to say thank you too. This, for me personally, has been fascinating. I thank you so much. This is a gift.
thank you. All right. Well, it'll be great to see it online so that I can share it with those folks that couldn't make it.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll get Lexon to watch and see what
Right.
he has to say.
Well, we didn't do badly in terms
No,
of
no.
actual, yeah. So
All righty.
thank you, Margaret.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Margaret.
Good night.
Good night.